Recording in progress.
Okay, good talk. You ready to start? Okay. What the little flags is. Yeah. Okay. It's right here. Oh. All right. So we'll establish quorum. Commissioner Claris. Commissioner Jane.
Present.
Commissioner Zhang.
Here.
Commissioner Fowler.
Here.
And Chair Richmond.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum with Vice Chair Callback and Commissioner Ottos absent. Otis. Yeah. Okay. All right, like do the pledge or the flag?
The United States of America. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, America, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We don't have any public comments, so if you'd like, we can go into the first item.
Yeah, it's please.
Okay, so.
We have nobody logged on.
No.
You can see.
Okay. Okay. So the first item is introduction of our new financial commissioner. So welcome to Ken. Ken, do you mind taking 30 seconds and introduce yourself to the group?
Sure, I'm Ken Fowler. I lived in Little Telcos area at the turn of the century to PricewaterhouseCoopers. I left there, started teaching at San Jose State, Santa Clara. Retired from there a couple years ago. I'm now trying to do this as a benefit to my own sanity and try to get back and provide some benefits that based on my education and background. So I appreciate the opportunity to serve.
What did you teach at San Jose State Center?
Accounting and tax.
Oh.
What's your fund account?
Fund accounting is pretty good.
I keep asking to consolidate all the funds so I can understand them. So
Yes.
you can actually understand the funds. I think it's all a big trick, so. That's all.
Okay.
Right, perfect.
And maybe I'll take the opportunity with this one. If for those who haven't met, this is Nisha Singh. She is our finance manager with the city. So she'll be attending these meetings to make sure I don't say anything wrong related to finance. So we're excited to have her here. Okay. So the next item is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Well, you've taken action minutes to heart, haven't you?
I am for those who don't know, I'm a former city clerk. And very much it's action and that's what you get. So they should be easy to read, hopefully.
I no comment, but maybe points in time where our people want their views on the record, but I don't think there was any of that at this meeting, so. Could ask the other commissioners who are there if they have comments, otherwise we should move.
I move to approve.
Would you like roll call votes or just voice votes?
Should probably roll call.
We can roll call?
Minutes are recorded.
Okay, we can do roll call. All right, Commissioner Claris, Commissioner James, Commissioner Zhang, Commissioner Fowler, and Chair Richmond. Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, you ready for the next item?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have with us today from PARS, Jennifer and Hadi. I don't know, Jennifer and Hadi, can you hear us?
We can hear you. We can see you. It's fantastic.
All right, great. So as a bit of introduction, you'll remember the last meeting, we talked a lot about the city's unfunded liability related to pensions. We talked about the opportunities or option to pre-fund our payments. One of the things that we also just briefly introduced was the option to start a 115 trust, which is a tool that agencies can use to help with the payments of pensions. And so rather than having me try to explain it, we asked some experts from PARS, which stands for Public Agency Retirement Services, to come and to just give a brief presentation and, you know, answer any questions that you might have regarding this type of trust. So with that, I will turn it over to the team.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. And good evening, members of the committee. I went ahead and sent the presentation earlier today. Does everybody have a copy? It doesn't look like I'm able to share my screen at this time.
You should be able to now.
Okay, perfect. So we have a pretty lengthy presentation. We're not going to cover all of this. I'm going to take about 10 minutes to cover the administrative side of the 115 program, and then I'm going to turn it over to Hadi to talk about the investment portion of the account. So you get a little bit of an overview of both. Feel free to stop us at any point in time throughout the presentation to ask questions, or we can also answer questions at the end of the presentation as well. So I will try my best to say the number of each slide so that you can follow with me if you do have it in front of you or print it and whatnot. First slide just has our contact information. Hadi and I are accessible at any point in time. You want to reach out to us via email or phone. We're happy to assist even after this if there's any questions that come up after. Let's talk a little bit about the PARS program in itself before I talk about the Section 115 concept. The PARS 15 program has 3 different providers. One is PARS, where I'm from. We're the ongoing administrator and consultant of these plans. For these Section 115 programs to pre-fund pension, it does require a lot of administrative work and a lot of auditor information that is requested for this. So it's a lot of hand-holding that we assist these agencies throughout the, the life of the program. So we do all of the administrative aspects and the record keeping. We also use US Bank as a trustee. So they are the ones holding all of the money that the city contributes into these 115 programs and is protecting those assets. Those assets cannot be touched by creditors. Anything were to happen to the city, to PARS, or even US Bank, these assets are protected and can only be used for the purpose that the city placed them into the account for. So you have that added protection for that. And then we use a company called PFM Asset Management. Technically, they're owned by US Bank, but they go by the name of PFM, and they are the investment management group for this program. We do have 2 different investment platforms that we're going to talk about today to give you an idea of what's available, but that essentially makes up the 115 program with PARS. Now, the program itself. So let's talk about the city's liability. Just to remind you, you may be very familiar with this, but we always like to look at the liability and then show you how a 115 program can help your city. So we went ahead and compared your June 30th, 2023 actuary evaluation numbers directly from CalPERS. This is the latest information that is available. Currently, the 2024 won't be available until next year, so they're always about a year behind. So based on the latest information, it looks like the city's unfunded liability is about $51 million. That's assets minus the actual liability itself, puts you at an unfunded status of $51 million. So the city's about 70% funded. Typically, we see agencies anywhere between 60 to 80% funded for these programs. So you're right there in the middle. But based on the 2022 and 2023 valuations, we show a decrease in your funded status. And a lot of the reasons why agencies are utilizing a 115 program is to prepare for the future. Could my funded status go even lower at some point in the future? Could there be a point where we're not able to make the employer contributions out of our general fund and we need more assistance? So based on these valuations, that employer contribution from the city is going to go from 6.2 million up to 8.5 million. So currently about a 36% increase that the city has to look at. Most actuaries are saying this can continue possibly to increase all the way until late 2040. And so those are things that you have to start preparing today for tomorrow's future. What if we can't make that payment? What if there's a catastrophic event, another COVID-like situation where we're not able to utilize the general fund, or we're going to have to start cutting from other projects in order to make these payments? sales taxes aren't going up this steep. And so you need to start preparing today for those future increases on the account. And so that's what the 115 program allows you to do. In the past, the only thing that the cities could do was send additional money to CalPERS. Many agencies did send additional money to CalPERS and then realized that unfortunately it gets spread throughout the 20 or back then 30-year time frame, amortization time frame, and it didn't lower their rates significant in order to make a difference long term for them. So many agencies, what they wanted to do is have a locally controlled program that was outside of the general fund, but that the committee and the city and the council could still control. You can control the risk when it comes to the investments of those assets, because now you can diversify those assets differently than your general fund. You can take a little bit more risk, but up to the risk based on the city's tolerance. And you can tap or access that money at any point in time in the future to pay your pension liabilities or to reimburse yourself for those pension liabilities on there. So again, a locally controlled program outside of your general fund that helps you save for those rainy days, for any catastrophic events, or really just whenever the city wants to be able to utilize that money and earn a little bit, potentially a greater rate of return than your general fund.
Question.
So yes.
Now, you mentioned that it's administered through US Bank. And say we buy certain securities, say a bond or so forth. Is the bond in the city of Los Altos's name, or is it in a street name through US Bank? And I have a reason for the question.
That's a great question. Jennifer, you want me to take that one?
Yes, go ahead.
Because it is actually, US Bank functions as the trustee, or the trustee. The assets are held in the name of the city. And because it is a trust account, as Jennifer mentioned, those assets are separate and untouchable by creditors of the city, of the bank, of PARS, of anyone. And they are protected solely for the purpose for which the trust is created.
So they're not in the city's name?
They are in the city's name. 100% in the city's name, not in street name.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Perfect. Slide number 6. Currently, the city does have a Section 115 trust that you're currently utilizing through a different company to put money aside for your retiree healthcare obligations. With that, you do currently use CalPERS to pre-fund that. What many agencies are doing on the pension side is they want some financial flexibility. They also don't want to rely on one company to invest all of their assets. So you already have your biggest liability, your pension with CalPERS. You have already put money aside for your retiree healthcare with CalPERS. So agencies are saying, for pension pre-funding, I want to utilize a completely different company so that I don't rely on one company to invest the money or to try to get me all the money that I'm going to need in the future for these pension costs. We've had over 20 agencies now say, we like the PARS program. We actually want to move out of the CalPERS OPEB plan and just utilize the PARS Section 115 program. We've had many agencies do that, counties, special districts, and so forth. The city can do either 2 trusts. So you can say, you know what, we don't want to touch the CalPERS OPEB money. We're going to open a brand new Section 115 trust with PARS and utilize it only for pension pre-funding. That's completely up to you. You can certainly have 2 different trusts to be able to do that. Other agencies say, you know what, we're going to split it. We're going to, do essentially a beauty race and see who does better in 1 year. We're going to make a decision and only have one provider at that point in time. Completely up to you. Just know that the PARS program is what's called a combination trust, where in one program you can put money aside not only for retiree healthcare obligations, but also for pension on there. With the PARS program, there's no cost to set up. So any of the documents, any resolutions, any files that you need, even when you open the program, there are no fees until you actually start funding the program itself. At no point in time are there any required contributions into the program. Some cities decide they're going to put one-time money and then not fund it for a while because they just don't have any additional money. It's completely at your discretion when you want to fund the plan itself. The other flexible aspect of the PARS plan is the investments. So with the PARS program, you have the flexibility of changing the investments at any point in time. With the current plan that you have with CalPERS, that is not the case. Any money that you have with CalPERS under the 115 OPIP plan, those assets remain in that risk level that you originally chose. You cannot change that risk level. The only time you can make a different decision is if you send new money in, and that new money can be in a different investment strategy. That is not the case for PARS. At any point in time, you could say, I don't want to be this risky anymore, or I want to have more risk. I want to change the investment strategy. So you have full flexibility when it comes to that. And we're seeing a lot of agencies really like that flexibility, because what the city may be thinking now may not be the same in 5-10 years. So you have the flexibility of making that choice in those decisions. Go ahead.
Are you going to go through the fees later in the presentation and compare and contrast OPER versus PARS?
Yes, we have some slides on that.
Hey, John, how much money is in the OPEB trust?
It's a great question. I'd have to look it up.
I have that information
I
in
will
here.
be- She has it. Of course.
Yeah, I don't think it's all done.
It's not that much. I mean, or well, relative to the cities.
Relative to this issue.
You have about 3.5 million in there.
Gonna guess 5, so 3.5 plus. So I'm gonna get in front of you guys. Let's talk about the pension trust. To me, the OPEB is small dollars and not the focus of this discussion. We can come back to it and fold it in later, but I think given time, we ought to focus on pension liability.
Okay, perfect. Our 115 program does have what's called a private letter ruling confirming any earnings on the account are tax exempt. So you have that extra assurance from the IRS. As I mentioned, contributions into the program are completely flexible and at the city's discretion. And money that comes out of the trust is also very flexible. You can take out the current year's worth of expenses plus 1 year prior. So you have 2 years of reimbursements that you can essentially take out of the trust. You can take them out to pay CalPERS directly. You can pay yourselves for any costs that you've incurred, or you can pay for any type of external actuarial evaluations that sometimes cities decide to do with an outside actuary to try to forecast certain pension related liabilities and so forth.
And
And
can you say that again? You say, make sure I understand what you just said, is you have money sitting in the trust, that the trust can be invaded for current year pension contributions. It can be reimbursed for the immediately preceding year's pension contributions. And then on top of it, it can be invaded for some costs. Is that
Correct.
the cap?
Yes, any pension related costs can be taken out of the trust for the current and 1 year prior.
But it all has to be pension related. It can't be used for any general fund type thing.
No, once it goes in here, it's dedicated to that purpose. Okay, so you basically get 1 year to say, oops, I wish I would have used the trust last year.
Exactly.
Okay.
Slide 8, 9, and 10 provide you with different agencies that have adopted our program. Many in your surrounding area: Cupertino, Atherton, Santa Clara, Palo Alto. We always like to be very transparent and show you the other cities, counties, special districts, and education agencies that currently provide 115 programs through PARS. So just for your reference, if you know any of your counterparts at any of these agencies, feel free to contact them. We're very confident in our program that, we believe that if you picked up the phone, contacted any of our clients and asked them for a referral, why they chose PARS or why they even chose to do a 115 program, that they would provide good references for our company. All right. Slide number 11 just goes over the reasons why, and I promise we won't go through every single slide. This is probably one of the last slides that I'll touch on other than the fee slide, but it gives you information on why agencies are doing a pension pre-funding program. Number one, the fact that you have full control over these assets. You choose when to put money in, you choose when to take money out, when to pay CalPERS from the trust, and you choose the investments, and you can make that investment change at any point in time. We know that the rates continue to go up and it fluctuates year after year. One year it may go a little bit down, the next year it goes back up and so forth. And because of that volatility, agencies are looking to put money aside today to start preparing for those future increases. Number three, in case there's any type of catastrophic event, any one-time money that the city needs in the future, you have a fund that you're preparing for those future issues. And number four, of course, the fact that you can diversify your assets outside of the general fund and be able to invest that in a prudent way based on the city's risk. Okay. Now we go into the investments on the account. You do have the flexibility to diversify those assets outside of your general fund, as I mentioned. We do have two different platforms. We have a low-cost platform called the Target Index-Based Strategies, and we have an option B, which is the PFM Managed Tactical Strategies. Hadi, did you want to just go into the investment portion, and then just for time purposes, I'll do the fees at the very end?
Sure.
Let me know what you want to go into.
Okay. So Jennifer has talked a lot about the administration, the structure, the trust relationship. I get the cool part, which is the investments that actually drive the returns that allow the benefit to putting money aside, to being able to invest it outside of the California government code, and to endeavor to earn a rate of return that is a little bit higher by investing in a more strategic way. This first slide, and by the way, feel free to fire off questions as I go. I'm very happy to have them. This first slide refers to what was initially referred to as the low cost option. And these are target index-based strategies. So these funds are, for example, the first upper left corner there is fixed income only. To the right, conservative, balanced, and then growth. And not surprisingly, as you become more aggressive, you have more equities in the portfolio. These are passively managed, so it's all index funds, and they are rebalanced to these model numbers, but there are no tactical decisions being made. There's no decision being made, hey, large cap stocks look like a great value right now. Let's allocate a little more into that. Or fixed income is looking very attractive right now on a risk-adjusted basis. Let's tilt it a little more that way. None of that gets done. These portfolios, again, are low cost, and they're designed to be steady, like I say, index measuring type investment vehicles. These are the 1, 3, and 5-year returns for the different strategies. And you can see growth has an equity allocation of 75%. And then as you go down, you'll see lower and lower. The fixed income only option was relatively recently funded, so it only has 1 year of investment performance. But you can see the growth, balanced, and conservative all have 1, 3, and 5-year rolling returns. So the 5-year number would be each of the last 5 years, etc. Any questions all about that one?
Yeah, with respect to the balance, is that just traditional balance where you have a percentage of equities and a percentage of bonds?
Correct. It's 60% equity. And then we'd have to back up so I could show you what else is in there. But there's a fixed income allocation and a cash allocation. Okay, Jennifer, thank you.
Okay. And with that, for this specific platform, here are the fees. The PARS administrative fee starts at 25 basis points and goes down as assets increase. The US Bank and PFM fee is a combined fee, and it's based on all of the assets in the entire program that PARS manages, not just the city's assets. So you get the benefit of, as the PARS program continues to grow, you continue to see a lower fee. So that fee starts and currently is at 0.075 or 7.5 basis points. So this program all in is about 32 basis points for the fee. Again, a low cost type of approach. And in the later in the presentation, we'll also see how this, as somebody mentioned, how this compares to the CalPERS program when it comes to the return net of all of these fees as well.
Okay, so this slide represents the actively managed strategies. So we're using primarily mutual funds to fulfill these investment selections. And these are actively overseen by an investment professional who is in the California market. They get the benefit of all of our institutional investment management research, chief investment officer, investment committee decisions. And so they are managed in typically in more active funds, and they are managed, as I mentioned before, tactically with respect to market opportunities affecting things like how much small cap, large cap, stocks, bonds, other asset categories. And we have 5 of these strategies available, going from the least aggressive, which not surprisingly is conservative, and goes up to the most aggressive, which is capital appreciation. Next, there we go. So these are the performance numbers for 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. We've been doing this a long time. And you can see capital appreciation tops out at 65 to 85% in equities. So why is it a range? Because that strategy can be invested as little as 65% or as much as 85% in equity. And then you'll see the ranges going all the way down to conservative, which is 5 to 20%. For the record, people will often ask, hey, what's most commonly used? Very often with pension pre-funding, it is either moderately conservative or moderate. And the reason is that when you're investing for OPEB, you have an actuarially defined rate of return target, and you have a very long time horizon. When you're investing in pension pre-funding, you might be investing for a long period of time. You also might not, depending on situations. So most agencies, and generally our recommendation is, when you have a relatively uncertain time frame, you want to be a little bit more conservative. Having said that, we do have some agencies that literally are in capital appreciation for this strategy. So the spectrum is all over the place, but I just thought I'd share because most people want to know, hey, what do most people do? So
what's the current makeup of the CalPERS portfolio, roughly?
Jennifer, you might know that one better than I. They have 3 options, do they not?
Are you talking about the main pension program or the CRBT, the CERBIT program?
Straight, in other words, here's the point I'm poking at a little bit, which is there's 2 ways to look at what we're doing here. If you do this, one of which is just the liquidity benefit of, I haven't sent the money to Sacramento, and I can use this to cushion a trough in general fund or capital spending or somewhere else. Money's fungible to some extent. And the other approach would be, I want to invest differently than CalPERS does. And so I'm just asking just generally, and I can go figure it out.
Yeah.
Is roughly where they are. I mean, you have a bunch of money in alternatives and in real estate and other stuff, but how do you think, how is their portfolio invested? Because we're essentially a derivative of it.
And so that's the main pension program, and that compares more to our capital appreciation, which is the 65 to 85% in equity. They officially have about 50% in equity and about another 15%. I think it's in private equity and so forth. So, very risky investments. And so it really goes based on or it resembles more of the capital appreciation strategy. So it's one of the highest risk that we offer.
But just make sure I'm not looking at this wrong, right? So you could say it's risky if somebody else would say it's really long-term money at the end of the day, other than these monthly, the annual nuts we need to send up there. So if you invest more conservatively than that with an expected return that's less than that, You just have to understand you're theoretically making your hole a little bit bigger.
Right.
You're more flexible, but you're making your hole a little bit bigger.
Very good point.
That is a very, very advanced financial thought that you just had there. So I
Just
agree with
curious
you
what it's
wholeheartedly.
correct.
If
There's
the
many that
holding
have
period,
advanced and wrong, so.
if the holding period is long enough, what we know is historically equities have done better than bonds and bonds have done better than cash. What gets people concerned is the fluctuation in principal value that can occur when you add more equities to the portfolio. But you're exactly right that when you commit to a more conservative strategy in the presence of a long-term investment horizon, you are effectively under earning, which is a risk in itself.
Okay, all right, thanks. That's what I was trying to get my head around. Sorry to interrupt.
But you're, and I mean, you're right in that the idea with putting a pre-fund in is, as you pointed out, keep some liquidity so that you have this, so you could have flexibility. But you also don't want to invest it exactly the same, because if the main fund is doing poorly, do you really want your fund doing poorly as well? So there's something to be said for that. You know, the additional presence of bonds can often provide a cushion when stocks aren't doing very well. That has been less pronounced over the last 5, 7, 10 years than it used to be, but it's still a valid concept that drawing income from fixed income can help moderate other, losses in other parts of the portfolio. And then the other thing about the main fund at CalPERS is simply it's such a big fund. They have to find relatively esoteric ways to invest often. And that can create variance from like normal investment asset class returns. If we buy a REIT, they might have to actually buy buildings, and that can create idiosyncratic risk that isn't present in a smaller investment. If that's probably more than you wanted, but it's just another little wrinkle.
It also depends who's running the CalPERS portfolio this particular week, right? So they've done a lot of churning, but I'll let you guys keep going.
Thank you. Great conversation, by the way. I appreciate it.
For this second platform, you do have a dedicated portfolio manager that would be available to the city at any point in time for either in-person meetings, for investment committee meetings. If something happens to, the market and you just want to pick up the phone and call someone and be able to, have some type of an answer or some type of, market outlook and so forth, that's provided with this platform. So you will have somebody dedicated to your city for those different needs and so forth. And for that is our full service platform. The PARS fee remains the same, 25 basis points, and it goes down as fees increase. The US Bank and PFM asset management fee, that goes and it starts at 35 basis points and it goes down as the city's assets increase. So for this platform, you are looking at about 60 basis points when it comes to the fees. Hadi, did you have any other questions, or we can just look at the investment comparison as they requested against CalPERS?
I think what I would love to do just very quickly is just do are you all, PFM is a very well-known public agency asset management firm in California. So if everyone's familiar with our history and abilities and whatnot, we can kind of skip over this, but I don't want to leave that out if anyone is feeling like, wait, PFM? Who's PFM?
PFM in the past has invested money for the city in what I call the Orange County bucket. So the fixed income government regulated pool of investments. So I think we're familiar with it.
Is it CAMP or is it separately managed account?
Well, we're not.
It was both.
Yeah, it was both. We're not with PFM anymore, but
Okay.
it was up until recently.
Okay, hopefully we can fix that at some point in the future. But in the meantime, at least you're familiar with us. Long history managing assets.
But by the same token, all that investing was, trying to basically run parallel, and I forget whether it's B of A or Morgan Stanley's kind of index of 3-year tenor. So it's not very exotic investing, which is a benefit and a problem.
And this is another part of our business. This is what we call outsourced chief investment officer, or OCIO. And we manage about $35 billion just in that type of mandate. So it's something that we've done for a long time, we're good at. And it all stems, though, from our belief, and it's a public agency mentality, that we want to earn as much return as possible, but consistent with managing risk. We're very big believers in risk management. So Jennifer, if you want to, unless anyone has questions, you can just move along to there you go.
Perfect. So one of the questions was, how do we compare against CalPERS? So here's your current program. You're currently in the Strategy 1 of CalPERS CERBT program, and that closely relates to the capital appreciation that we have. So as you can see, net of all fees as of June 30th, which is the latest information that we currently have, we have outperformed CalPERS in the 1, 3, 5, and 10 year. 1 year, and a couple of these are pretty significant, increases that we've had compared to them. And again, it's that mentality of sometimes, the cheapest car in the lot isn't always the best. We pride ourselves in our service and our commitment to our cities, and we always want to show you what we can do for you. We don't pride ourselves in being the cheapest car in the lot or anything like that. But we do have, as I mentioned, a dedicated portfolio manager that can assist you with that, with this specific platform. And I believe I put the second, oh no, it looks like I only did one. I didn't include here the low cost platform, but we're also outperforming them on that one. And you can look at the comparison as well throughout the pages. But again, we just want you to be aware of the information and how transparent we are to provide you all of these details. And you can do this research in the background as well. But just wanted to provide that information. For time.
But John, this election is only available on the OPEB money, right? The pension money is just invested by CalPERS as they invest everybody's money, or do I misunderstand that?
No, you're correct. So we have not set up a 115 trust for,
OPEB.
no, we have for OPEB, we have not for pensions.
But, okay, and that 150, but you have it under a white label or product I'm sorry, the point on the phone is that we're using a CalPERS product.
So
where we have some flexibility.
So the bottom, the CRs, the CalPERS is we have our trust with, yes. Yeah, it's the bottom one that's on the screen that you all can't see.
Okay, I see.
One question, for capital appreciation, you can have 65 to 85% in equities, and for the passive one, when you have growth, what was that number, 65%?
75.
And your capital appreciation is beating that growth fund?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Points of capital appreciation is better than the growth. I don't know what to call it, growth.
It
strategy.
is. It's funny. I actually wrote these numbers down. I thought, geez, I wonder how they've done. The 1 year number for growth was 14.11. For capital appreciation, it's 15.46.
For 10 years.
Sorry?
To 10 years, 7.22 versus what?
Well, the growth option, the passively managed option, only goes out for 5 years. So the 5 year number for growth is 8.32%. And the 5 year number for capital appreciation is 8.27%.
Okay. Thank you.
So very comparable, but the index at 5 years ekes it out a little bit. But the extra 145 basis points or 135 basis points for the actively managed over a year is.
So this is net of all of these.
Gross of the fees.
Oh, it's gross of fees, not net of PARS and US Bank, those fees?
That is correct. These are gross of fees. The slide that Jennifer showed later, that was net of fees.
Okay, it's hard for me to read the numbers, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, during the meeting.
That's all, thank you.
And then that's it for our presentation. We're happy to take any additional questions. We don't want to take too much of your time, but we're open to any questions that you may have.
Commissioner, I typically would not jump in with questions, but if you don't mind if I ask one real quick. So, Jennifer, the assets that we pull out from the 115 trust, and if we choose to send it directly to Sacramento, does that operate the exact same way as if we took funds from our general fund and sent it to Sacramento? To PERS? So currently we can say, hey, PERS, we want, here's $5 million. We want to put 2.7 million towards our miscellaneous tier 1 and 2.3 to our safety tier 1. Would we be able to do the same thing with the funds from the trust?
Yes, so actually that's an excellent question and something I didn't bring up. So yes, you can utilize it the same way. While I mentioned that you can reimburse yourself for the current year and 1 year prior, when you send money to CalPERS, it's up to the unfunded liability. So hypothetically, if you had $50 million in this program, you in one request within a few business days, you can send all 50 million directly to CalPERS. So that's, that's the flexibility to sending it directly to CalPERS, or you can send it like that. You can send it for, different bargaining groups. You can send it for different amortization periods, however you'd like, as long as it's up to that $51 million or whatever the unfunded liability is at that time.
Or you can just fund your monthly note if you want to, right? If you be general fund money. Right. You must have more questions. You're closer to this than we are.
Well, I've we've had this presentation from them before, and yeah, so.
All right, so one more thing from a fee perspective. If you assume for a moment that the decision's made to migrate the OPEB out of CalPERS and to begin to build a pension 115 plan, are those treated as silos for a fee perspective, or are they aggregated?
They're aggregated to give you a lower fee on the fee schedule.
Good.
Yeah, that's a great question.
All right, what else would you guys tell us to make sure we take away from this presentation to chew up the last bit of silence here? But what do people get wrong when they leave and they, have, as I call it, conceptual dyslexia and didn't really quite understand it? What's the core elements you'd want people to understand?
Yeah, so we've gone ahead and also outlined the differences between us and of course our biggest competitor, CalPERS. As I mentioned, one of the biggest things is do look at the investments when it comes to these programs, the fact that you can be flexible with these investments with PARS, you can change it at any point in time. If you realize, today, we weren't aggressive enough and we want, we don't need this money for 15, 20 years. We want to be more aggressive. You can certainly do that with the PARS program and change it at any point in time. We are the #1 and fastest providers and pioneers of pension pre-funding. And a lot of it is, as I mentioned, is because agencies already have so much money invested with CalPERS that they don't want to utilize one company or bet on one company to help financially, with everything that the city has. So they want to have financial flexibility and use a different provider and not put all your eggs in one basket. And so that's why we have over 300 agencies that have used us instead of CalPERS when it comes to pre-funding. For us, if you decide, you know what, we're going to give PARS a chance. Let's give them a year, see how they do. If you're not happy with us, there's no termination fee, no restrictions to get out. All we need is just a notice from city, the plan administrator, which typically is a city manager, finance director, so forth, just letting us know, hey, we're going to go ahead and transfer this money to another trust, to CalPERS, or and so forth. We want to close it out. And then we go ahead and close that out for you. There's no restrictions or anything like that, like other providers have. And we make it very easy for you to enter the program and to exit the program because we're that confident in our services. And of course, the fact that you have more flexibility when it comes to your investment options. We have 2 different platforms and a variety of different investment options within those, where other providers usually have 1 or 2 and so forth. So it kind of, doesn't give you that flexibility when it comes to that. So just a couple of key takeaways for you to consider and for you to ask. We want to make sure that you look around and you do all of your research, but just want you to be aware of those differences on there.
All right,
I'm gonna throw.
Go ahead, please.
I'm going to throw on just a relatively simpler concept, sort of the capstone to the whole thing, which is funding like this, creating an account like this, whether it's with us or whether it's with someone else, if I'm being completely honest, is a good idea. This is very fiscally responsible. It's extremely prudent because what you're doing is you're planning for the uncertainty of tomorrow. And also you're planning for the certainty that in this case with pension, it's going that cost is going nowhere but up. And this is going to, someone 10 years from now is going to look back at this and thank you for doing that. Again, we'd love for it to be with us, but whether it's with us or someone else, it's a very good concept.
All right, so I'm going to give you one more statement, and you guys can react to it, because to me, one of the big selling points you guys are making here is in fact a big problem. Which is you have a political body of sorts that's got to make investment decisions that they're pretty darn ill-suited. So right now, you can basically say, look, CalPERS is running whatever it is, $250 billion, and it is what it is, and we're still subject to that. So how do you go about making decisions about investing the money? Because as I said, I think there's 2 issues here. The liquidity is super interesting, but how do you go ahead and make those decisions in a relatively small municipality where you're talking about relatively small amounts of money in the greater scheme of things, but where a divergence from CalPERS will be noticed, especially an adverse diversion?
I think that's an excellent reason to consider hiring a portfolio manager to provide the discussion that can lead to a relatively easy decision about which investment objective is correct. And the fact that really acted on the passive side, it's 4 options, but really only 3 because fixed income only is a very odd choice for this program. And on the active, it's 5. And it is not that difficult to get to an investment objective, and it is done in consultation with a seasoned investment professional, way smarter than I am. And I'm smiling when you ask that question, because when folks hire us, it usually just isn't a problem. It sort of becomes evident. But I understand what you're saying, which is no one gets in trouble for hiring CalPERS. It's CalPERS. Everyone knows CalPERS, but often.
And I own the risk anyway. So my $50 million unfunded liability, which is the hole in the donut we're talking about here, I own that. They've created that. They created it part politically, and they created it part with the 6.8 discount rate, which may or may not be the right number. It's probably a little bit light, but it may or may not be the right number. So that's a risk I own. I can't do anything about it. And this will be a different risk. So it's just something to think about.
But it's a diversifying risk. So I think it argues for setting up something that is separate from CalPERS.
One last question from me. Do you have these performance numbers net of fees?
Not on the presentation, but we can
Do you have
provide
it
that
written
to you if you'd
outside?
like.
I would love to see that
Yes, please provide it to us.
for both passive and active.
Yeah, because that would help us a tremendous, especially if we can subtract out what PERS is currently estimated. so we can see the delta.
What was the last part? What PERS is currently estimating?
What CalPERS is currently estimating for the same categories. If we can look at that and then we can measure risk versus CalPERS,
Okay.
or just give us the other data and we can figure it out.
We'll get that to you for sure.
Super helpful. We appreciate it. And thanks for sending it, John, for those of us who are myopic. We now can read the numbers. Everybody should have it. But any other questions for the PARS people? Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Super informative and interesting, and something we need to give some thought.
Perfect.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you so much for your
time.
time.
Thanks for a great discussion. Much appreciated.
Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, so that leads into the next item on the agenda, which is really, yeah, go ahead.
So this discussion was about PARS versus CalPERS. Are there other?
There is,
Like PARS?
I believe there's one other, and I'd have to look up who it is. They're not as big as either PARS or PERS. I mean, as they said, PARS really is the leader in this, and PERS is now making sure that they stay involved. There is one other, but I'd have to look up who, I believe there's one other that I have to look up who they are. There's not a lot that can operate this kind of program.
And my guess is there's some compliance costs to build it up, because there's some government code and other provisions, and they got to comply with some PLR that's out there that told them you got to do this and not do that. They have your tax treatment, so.
And they've got approved by some, it's Sacramento, I'm sure. So, this kind of leads into the discussion, or the continuation of the discussion that we had last month, around our general strategy of addressing our unfunded liabilities and our rising pension costs. I included in your packet the presentation that I gave last month, just as a frame of reference and as to have. I did want to share really quickly before we start discussing, as Jennifer mentioned, the actuarial data for 2023 has been released since our last meeting. And so I wanted to show just a little bit of what that has done to our unfunded liabilities. So this slide was included in the presentation last meeting. It showed our accrued liabilities, the asset of or the value of our assets, and what our unfunded liability is. You can see there, our unfunded liability was about $48.4 million. And we were funded at about 71.5%. This is, of course, the from 2022 data. If we look at 2023, our funding ratio actually went down to about 70.9. And this is because PERS had a good year in 2023, and so our liability went up because they had a good year. And of course, if they had a bad year, our liability would go up. So our unfunded liability currently is about $51.8 million.
Okay, but you say that, but did they, from June 22 to June 23, take the discount rate? Is this apples to apples in the discount rate?
Yes, it is. They have
So
not lowered.
6.8.
Yeah, 6.8. They have not lowered the discount rate since, I think, 2020. 2022.
Right, and as you and I discussed, they've said they're gonna stop
Yes.
fussing with it for the immediate future, so 6.8's the.
So 6.8 is gonna be a golden number for a while,
For a while until
until they
somebody,
decide to change it.
until somebody politically decides to change it. Yeah, so at the last meeting, I told you they had a policy that if they exceeded the discount rate by 2 percentage points, they would automatically lower the discount rate. Well, they exceeded it by more than 2 percentage points and decided, you know what, we don't want to actually lower it, so we're going to suspend that policy and leave it the way it is. So, and if you look, the driver of this, our liability went from 169 million to 178 million, so about $9 million increase there. But the value of our assets only went up about 4 to 4.5. So that's really, you know, why our unfunded ratio went up.
Are those two numbers increasing at the same percentage rate or?
No.
They're calculated separately.
Got it.
One of them, the top number, the liability number, my guess is informed by life expectancy, which is probably still, or at least recovered after COVID, at least from the other stuff I've seen. And also what's embedded in that is people got raises.
People got raises. Employees who in a previous actuarial might have thought they would retire, didn't retire. It's just, there's a number of factors that
So there's an inflation factor in that as well.
drives the
cost of
liability
living.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, because the exit liability is driven by exit compensation.
Got it.
So if you make the $5 million donation to the 115 plan, that will go directly in the market value and reduce our liability.
No, that'll be separate.
So we can't disclose that in a footnote or something to somebody?
Well, so it would show up in our annual financial report, but it would be separate from the PERS. Report.
So if I'm a union worker or somebody who's concerned about my funding rate, I'd have to realize that the city of Los Altos is still providing for me with the 115 plan. But I'd have to make that connection. We can't do that for them somehow.
Well, we can try.
But do you hear from the work groups at all about, the work groups are all assuming this is money good? Right?
Yeah, they know that the city will be good for it, and when it comes time for them to retire, that their pensions will be there.
It's not like the Teamsters.
But that's what's killing Corn Valley, right? The police funding there, just like our police funding is under.
Yeah, and so what other agency, we are fortunate that the annual payments for the unfunded liability has not become too overly burdensome yet.
Yeah.
Whereas other agencies are, you know, astronomical amounts that and percentages of their budgets that they just can't handle, right? And so that's, I think, where labor groups start to get a little uncomfortable is, well, you need to pay for us first, and then you can, you know, fix the roads and everything else. And that's not something that we've had to deal with yet.
Ken, in some ways, I still can't get my head around Portola Valley's problems, but set that aside. This is in some way, a lot of people are in worse shape because one advantage of being kind of a smallish city.
Yeah.
You didn't insource a lot of stuff at the margin, and the insourcing creates people who are full-time and on CalPERS, and so you don't have a big yard full of guys maintaining a heavy equipment or running your own trash collection or stuff that a lot of cities brought in and have a lot of employees who are pre-2013 people with very high approval rates.
So has council established what they want for that unfunded, or that funding ratio?
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a minute, if you don't mind. So the chart, the table, the graph on the left is what we saw the last meeting. The one on the right is updated to 2023 data. They look very similar. The difference is the scale on the left. Now we're seeing, whereas we were under 6 million, now we're hitting 6 million in the future. And so this is a better way to look at it. The orange is what it used to be, and now the green is where the actuarial data is saying that our payments are going to be in the future.
So it's gotten worse.
It has gotten worse. So as a reminder, the current strategy that we're looking at is pre-fund our UAL until we reach a certain target amount a percentage of funding. Obviously, we don't want to fund it at 100% because then we'll be giving PERS money that's in years that ratio goes up and we may overfund liability. And so determine what number, what percentage that we want to be around. It would be similar to, we currently have a policy to have a 20% operating reserve. So we would fund to that amount and then make sure each year that we are, staying at that target amount. And then after that, establish the section 115 trust to then further help offset the costs. I would envision that as we're making our annual payments and sort of as Tony was saying, we make our annual payments and then we reimburse ourselves from the trust each year, right? To help offset the impact.
You go back, John, what were the gross numbers at 23 on assets and liabilities? I know 51 was the net. I just didn't have the gross pieces.
So
179, 178, 3.
178.3 and 26.
The total employees, do you think that covers for the 178?
It's a great question. I would have to look into the actuarial data to figure out. We currently have about 150 currently employed that are in the PERS system. But then I have to look and see how many are, former employees or, retirees.
It's a pretty hard calculation because don't you have like sharing with other cities if they go to other locations?
Yeah. Okay, so the discussion that we're asking the commission to have, and I realize this as questions for next month, that's questions for this month because I just took the slide from last month. What level do we want to fund at? As you heard Jennifer say, most cities are between 60 to 80% funded. I would think we'd want to be higher than that. What amount? I don't know the right amount number to be funded at. I think it's more what we're comfortable with. We'll get there over time. It won't be an immediate, we'll pay what, $25 million or however much we need to get there. But we'll get up to the funding level that we need to. And then should we open a section 115 trust and start funding that as well.
So whatever the number the commission suggests, that'll be a recommendation to the city council who will make the decision. Is that right?
Yeah, I would think that we would include it as sort of an overall policy to the council and certainly if we are going to pre-fund the payments, we have to get that authorized by the council. And so it'll go together as part of that.
We probably should put the percentage, whatever 70% is in dollars, what 75% is in dollars, so that they can see exactly how much that's going to impact their budget.
Yeah, I can tell you what it is, because just did the math. To get to 80, and you don't have, the city does not have this much money loose in its jeans. To get to 80% is $16.2 million. And to get, but that's just this. If you did it on if you did it on a rifle shot basis, and so I want to get to 80% today, somebody needs to go find $16 million. Okay, if you want to get to 85%, it's 25 too, so call it $25 million. and again, against a city that has gross cash reserves and kind of the $65 million zip code. So my personal view is even the lower end of that, you wouldn't impose that level of illiquidity on yourself in the short term. You'd have to work your way through it.
Mhm.
Or if you wanted to work your way through to it, I would do it in a trust so you can fall back.
Yes.
On it, so. But other people have different views, and on this one, John, I think this is a super hard discussion to have in the abstract of what kind of capital spending people have in mind, right? So just for the burden of everybody, right? When I got involved in this, cash reserves of the city were about $100 million. This is why it's 65, because you're sitting in it. And some burn and some other, during COVID and whatnot, the city effectively, when you cut through, everything ran a little bit negative. And so this was 38 and a half. We borrowed what, 8 or 10 of that. We've amortized a little bit. Call it 35 against the 100 is the bridge. Everything else kind of washed out and netted out to 0. That's how you got to about 65. So my pushback on doing now is, without knowing diplomatically what the extraordinary project spends are in mind, and how much, if you will, equity that will take, how much will be borrowed, what will that will do. I think this is hard to confront. Because if we still had 100 million and we'd already built this building, then I might say, well, 100 million is the better part of 2 times the general fund spend a lot of money to have previously taxed from people and just have it in a pile in a bunch of short-term bonds. So I think you can paint, once you unpack the 65 million, a bunch of that's in places it can't be readily spent. Some of it's on its way down to the sewer plant in Palo Alto and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So I think this is really, I think we have the numbers, but I think this is a hard discussion to have unless somebody's gonna say, yeah, on infrastructure, we're really gonna focus on needs, but we have these needs and this has all gotta fit together. So that's why I've had trouble attacking this, and just, I'll throw out my straw man because I had a different, I mean, I think if we got it to anywhere near 80, I'd put the rest of it in the trust. The advantage of the trust is if you can get over this, how are you going to invest it, and are we going to feel good if you have 2 bad years, which is going to happen, then I'm, I think, an advocate for the trust only because it protects us from making liquidity. In other words, we're not going to, if you have the trust, you're going to have some protection from like the Portola Valley problem, which is, okay, we're effectively going to use that trust to offset the general fund obligation to pay CalPERS, and we bought an option that's, to me, a liquidity option. And that's why I think of this in 2 different perspectives. One is, how do I protect my liquidity if I really need it? And how do I attack the need to earn 6, 8 or better, plus these other factors to keep up with CalPERS? So I'm not opposed to using some money to do it, having a bunch of money, no matter how good, 3-year treasuries have been lately. That's not really the state of the world. So I'm okay. It just, to me, it's, and the city manager, I'll get involved at some point. This is breaking off a piece to the puzzle where it feels good to buy this down, but it may leave you in a bad spot if you've overspent on this. And this is an obligation that's, it's going to take 15, 20 years to work this off. And I don't think we're I'm not sure we're in a dramatically worse place than other people. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. That's totally non-determinative and nobody can act on that. That's just my mush on it.
You also have to look at our major projects, like there's talk of the parking structure. Are we gonna end up owning theater that people are talking about. This is, I agree with Tony, this is very real liability when you get to 80–85%, probably very desirable. And it needs to be made crystal clear to council that we have limitations and we can't do necessarily everything they want to do. If we end up owning the theater, which is a concern of mine, that they're gonna get us a certain way and then bail us out city. This number is gonna be a real problem for that. And so we kind of have to look at the major projects in total along with this.
For the trust, other than a couple of bad years and political problems associated with that, are there other downsides?
Here's the only thing I worry about is it's effectively invadable, right? So
Which is a plus and a minus.
plus and a minus, right? It cuts both ways, right? There was, John will remember this, it's eventually resolved itself, but there's a big project on El Camino that threw off the park and lieu that came off 5150 El Camino, $5 million, $6 million. All right, so $10 million. When this building was being built, I can tell you the Financial Commission had in the back of its mind, okay, that project's gonna happen. That's gonna create a big park and lieu influx. That park and lieu money, we were assured, is eligible to be used to service the debt on this building. And then you woke up at one point and there was a brief decision that the money would instead be used to buy land to actually build a park rather than backstop this project. So it's exactly your point. You just would have to say, we're really not gonna invade that trust to make other than extraordinary payments, but for regular obligations to make the pension payments, we're just, everybody's gonna have to link arms and say, that's not what it's doing. Because otherwise, the one advantage should be send it to Sacramento, you can't get it back. And it has, again, a very slow, useful, but slow effect on your annual servicing requirements.
Decides what level of risk if we do go. Because it could be very easily become very political. Especially, and it's very realistic, it could be down for 2 years. And if it goes to city council, those council members may be out of office and change and all of that. And even though it would have been good to just stay and work it out. Who's gonna have that intestinal fortitude?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The city does have our investment policy. I have to look to see if this would apply to the Section 115 trust or not. But that, does guide what our investment strategy is. Our new investment firm, they'll take that strategy. They'll take the policy which says, okay, you can invest this much in this and this much in that, and then they'll invest as best they're, manage the portfolio as best they
But
can.
that's mostly bonds and what they're doing.
It's all bonds.
Yes, and so this is gonna have equity risk in it in order to be.
Yeah, so it'll be a new investment.
So a new line in the investment procedure. I mean, you could do cover or get cover by putting it back in the procedure and throwing it to us. And that way you guys have cover and the city council has cover.
It's not the council that
Yeah,
changes every 2 years.
exactly. And that way you'll have people who can discuss it who don't necessarily have political motivation.
I mean, I think it's solved because I think the realistic amounts of money that are gonna be in this anytime soon aren't so great that it creates an, oh my God moment. I do think if you were gonna do this, John, I'd aggregate the OPEB in it to get up their fee scale, and save some money across the board, kind of in for a penny, in for a pound, and the OPEB money you may invest differently, because that's super long money, right? Isn't that that's $3.5 million, like, did I read it right? The annual call on it's like $125,000 a year. It's really long. Okay.
Are you asking for a vote from us on this?
Not necessarily tonight, no. I think this is gonna be a continuing conversation that we're gonna have, and certainly I agree, you know, without knowing, okay, these are the big projects that are coming, that we need to figure out how we're gonna fund and how that affects what monies that we have for this. I completely agree. It is something that we'll have to continue having the conversation for. One thing that we do have $5 million currently in our PERS reserve fund. And so the question, you know, I think for us to consider and ponder is, well, what do we do with that 5 million? Are we better off putting it straight into a 115 trust? Do we send some of it to PERS? Do we, you know, yes, do we send it to PERS? Do we, you know, do half and half? What is the best with that $5 million? Because frankly, keeping it in the city's bank is so. Yeah,
That's not,
the worst idea.
yeah, that's not what we should do. So I totally
No,
agree with
we
that.
can probably go to 15 trust fairly soon with regard to that. If that makes sense.
And you guys should you and the city manager should make a recommendation on that in particular, because what we did last time, and it may be that these pools, and this is one with no one listening, I said, I really didn't understand how picking pools created different effects, but there was some slicing and dicing last time that dedicating certain pools got us a reasonable a reasonable reduction, which was that little downturn, which seems to have been turned around altogether. So I think the real question is, how much and how quickly do you buy down the obligation, or should we just say, the heck with it? We've got $3.5 million in OPEB. We got 5 million ready to go. Let's take another $1.5 million and at least get ourselves to the $10 million fee level and see if this works. I also do look, there's prognosticators. I would assume these numbers got no worse, given that CalPERS has been outspoken that they significantly outperformed the 6.8 at June 24. Now everybody got raises. Yeah.
That whole thing just sounded confusing.
Well, but John, everybody got raises. That's totally unaffected by any of this. That's just that top lines.
No, I'm
Gonna
laughing
keep-
more if they do well. They will.
Yeah, you know that. Because I was suspicious of that. It was not really. There was some modest reasoning around that, which was basically, look. You don't win every year. These are public employees. We'd like less volatility in our funding obligation. And as we take the discount rate down, we do take volatility out of funding. We're more likely to have ups than downs. And I just think they took it to 6.8. There is so much distress out among their clients that saying, I want to get more conservative than 6.8. I just think makes people who sit in rooms like this unhappy, and they need to stop.
Tony, does 0.05% reduction in fee move the needle?
I think what you'll find when I looked at the number was the actively managed stuff net of fees is actually a little below the passive stuff.
Right, that seems to be the case.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting to is the desire to get to 10 million.
Yeah.
To get into the next fee tier. I mean, my math at 10 million, 0.05% is $5,000.
They take you from 25 to 20 basis points, right?
Yeah, that's 5 basis points.
And it's 5 basis points on
10
10
million.
million.
It's $5,000.
All right, well, I was off by order of magnitude.
Maybe my math's wrong.
No, you're not more likely to be right. Probably. Just fees are corrosive, right? That's
True, but yeah.
that's a small
I
difference.
mean, if we get to 10 million in 3 years from now versus now, it's not gonna be that big.
No, that's very small.
Well, what we'll do is we'll come back in November, we'll talk about it and do a little bit more digging and research and come back with a recommendation for the commission to consider what to do with the $5 million. I should mention, we also have in the budget $1 million to transfer into that reserve. And so at the end of the fiscal year, we'll have another $1 million that we get to decide what to do.
There's no benefit of trying to bump up the city's cash reserves. I mean, you said it was $100 million a few years ago.
Well, it's $100 million, I think, and John goes back further than I on this, because basically the city had been kind of running, bake sales and garage sales for the better part of 30 years to build this building and was accumulating money.
So it was intended for this purpose.
At least the first 25 million, I think, had been earmarked for this purpose for a long time. And then when I first got involved with, and again, it's facing some of these infrastructure projects on that 65 million, right, is around here, the cost of construction has for a long time gone up at a rate faster than you can invest 2 or 3 year money for. And so you're kind of chasing your tail, and that gap keeps opening. And with this building, the gap just kept opening. And at a certain point, you just got to go, either it's important or not, and I'm going to do it. And we ultimately borrowed the $10 million. And then, people can decide whether this was the right priority or not, but it was on the city council's, everybody's number one priority that, darn it, we're finally gonna do it. And on that one, we got lucky, right? Because there was only one contractor who bid, but they bid pre-COVID and pre the big inflation run up. And we borrowed $10 million at 2.5. And we were so nervous about it that a fair bit of the discussion was negotiating how the prepayment windows worked. Because we might want to prepay it because we didn't really like having the debt. And now it's a big shrug every year where nobody wants to prepay that cheap debt that's on this building.
The 30-year loan?
10 years. And with some amortization. So it's kind of working its way off on its own. I think you guys ought to, sit with Gabe. We're going to have a turnover in the city council, but I think everybody else can weigh. What I'm saying is, I think there's some big picture thinking, and I've conveyed that to him before, where this is hard to bite off as one issue. And if there are some big projects, I probably have a bias towards the trust. If somebody has eyes on that 65 million, wants to spend some more of it down on a police station, a park, and beyond what's in park and lieu, then that just, to me, the most imprudent thing would be liquidity risk. The rest of this is when and how we pay this money, and we may pay it later because we wait and don't pay it down now. But getting into a position like Portola Valley and going, well, we're really worried about your fill in the blank, Plainfield world, where you can't fund public safety and you can't fund stuff that has, because public safety, we know that fire contract is going to move based on all. They've got a bunch of CalPERS dudes and dudettes riding around on those fire engines, all of whom are in the most expensive tier in CalPERS.
The part I think that would be very beneficial is if we can at least take
The cash flow basis over 5 or 6 years. As you projectize projects, they burn cash at different rates. We receive property taxes, sales tax and so forth at a known level. You can do a Monte Carlo distribution to get it fairly accurately. And then we can start doing long-term projections for these. And then we can actually look and see what the priorities of the city council are, where we want to spend money, and then it become fairly apparent. Capital down along those lines. And you and I can talk offline on how to, what it
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
Do we have any more discussion on this?
And any other questions? Okay. So we'll have part 3 in 2 weeks. Okay. So the next item was an update on the implementation of our new financial software system. Our interim finance director prepared a report. She was going to be here to answer any questions. She obviously isn't. She is the best person to ask the questions. So if you have questions, you can send them my way and we can get them to Stephanie and ask her. I think the highlight of it is we are on track for implementation and going live by July 1.
My only question was the one we had last week, the chart of accounts. Make sure the auditors buy into it. Make sure everybody in the county likes it. And that it has some growth for, more basically individual buckets. There's enough digits for each one. Because that's what killed us in Central Square is they didn't allow enough digits to create sub accounts. And so make sure that you just have a lot of people when you're doing any design development, you can't have enough people look at it. Pull people off the streets and just say, hey, look at this. What are we doing? Because once that chart of accounts is set, particularly on a relational database like that, you own it.
Is there value in pushing out that agenda item to next month?
I don't know if there is. I mean, this was more just a status update where we are now. Like I say, if you have specific questions that you want to ask of Stephanie, then we can certainly get you the answers to those questions. But like I say, the project is moving forward. Keep forgetting the number that we're at in the series, and so there's various.
Yes, there are 300 series and there are 400 series. We are already done with 300 ones. We are in the second phase comparatively where we are trying to configure, do the process reinforcement and data configuration. So we have already reconciled fiscal year 23 and 24 with the help of a couple of companies like I don't remember, SDI and KOA Hills that help us take the data from FE and move it to Tyler Munis, and we have configured it, balanced it out, or balance matches, balance forward matches, and all these budgeting values, everything is matching as per the old system. So we have collected all the data. Currently 300 series has been done. We are moving on to 400 series where the finance team is being involved. They are trying to get themselves trained.
300 CDs, what is
Basically,
that?
initial where the chart of accounts were being set up, the whole how the project would line up, how the configuration will happen, all these basic setup of the system was done in 300 series. Now that 400 series will kick in, I think most of the finance team will come and start training themselves with the dynamics, get acquaintance regarding accounting, financing, and like purchasing, contracts, and budgeting, all the different features. So we all have access starting next week. We're going to be having full-on training with how to use the process system. So yes, most of the data has been accumulated and moved forward, and we're still doing all the backup configurations simultaneously with our training.
How many super users are you planning on having?
Sorry.
Super users.
Super users, we're setting up super users.
How many super users?
I think Stephanie and myself are good to go.
And you'll be bonded?
Yes, and it's one extra facilities who's available, who's Who's managing all of this as, I think he's in program.
Okay, so we'll have 3 super users. And then, and all these people will have background checks and be bonded and all of that.
So what's the LLC? I mean, Stephanie is working as our interim finance director, and then the city also hired her LLC.
Yeah, so we initially contracted with her as our interim finance director, and then amended the contract to add in the services for Tyler implementation. So when we get a new finance director on board, Stephanie will stay on with the city and continue and make sure that the Tyler implementation is successful. We felt it was important to have sort of that continuity throughout, so that our new finance director wasn't trying to jump in midstream, and at the same time manage budget, mid-year budgets, everything else that is starting to come up. So
Where are you at in spending on the project?
that's a great question.
I haven't seen the bills, but I don't know the accumulated total. I can get back.
And maybe in November, somebody can give us, because this started as a $350,000 project. I'm highly confident there's no longer a $350,000 project.
Is it gone over $1 million is really the question.
Yeah, I'll get you over.
Okay, so the last item is the commission's work plan, which was included in your packet. I'm gonna share the screen here to call it up. This is something that the commission had talked about having a discussion around, potentially creating some subcommittees to work on some of these. I know looking at performance goals and measures was something that the commission wanted to look at. This is also something that we will work to finalize, because the commission will be meeting with the council sometime in the new year to kind of go over what the commission has been working on, and then what is coming up. This will also help us populate the meeting schedule for next year, which I plan to come back in November with sort of a rough outline of when all these projects and items will come before the commission. Tried to make it bigger and I made it small.
So it's okay. I think everybody should look at this with the view of marking it up in November. Others may want to do something now. I think the one thing we promised we would do is create a subcommittee of commissioners who had a view on, or wanted to arrive at a view of reporting KPIs, for lack of a better term, which is I think was Scott's view.
Yeah, Scott wanted to volunteer and I'm happy to volunteer for it.
And I think since he's in Nepal, that means presumably Scott, and what do we limit? We limited to 2 or 3 noses.
We can have 3, up to 3.
Okay, so
Any other victims on the channel?
I'm happy to volunteer.
all right, you have your 3. Let's, since it was Scott's idea, let's note that he's in charge.
Absolutely. He is our leader.
Okay.
And I think that's it. That in the past, we've had subcommittee on pension. I think we shouldn't do that right now. At least there's not enough data to power through. And then where are you at on finance director?
Great question. So I think I let the commission know we had offered and it had been accepted, and then about a week and a half before they were due to start, they withdrew. We have now extended another offer that's been accepted, so hopefully, I know I said this last month, but hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have a finance director to introduce you to.
Well, I can't go for you.
What's the scheduled start date?
November 12th, yeah. So a couple weeks.
And at the risk of asking a generalized but specific question, somebody who's local or relocated? All right.
Oh.
There.
They're 15 miles local. I like 2 candles for you then.
30 questions and ask if they have to transit a bridge. We'll keep it. All right, anything else? All right, let us know when you have the $51 million, so we can just discharge the liability.
You're gonna go back and look for it right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait to see the big sale. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.